At Fever Tree, we think whether it's a gin and tonic, a delicious mule, or a sparkling Paloma, if 3/4 of your drink is the mixer, shouldn't it be made with the finest ingredients, mixed with the best? Fever Tree.
What is happening, Post Shifters? Welcome back to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Shawn Soole. This week, we've got Kimberly Flear. Now, if you haven't noticed, I've been doing a lot of podcasts about everything. And the strangest thing about this season 6 of the podcast, is explaining to people what I actually do on the podcast. Because I've had a lot of people go, oh, well, I don't talk about cocktails. And I'm like, I don't think I've talked about cocktails on this episode, on the season whatsoever, except for a few things here and there. But it's not a cocktail podcast. It's a business, mental health, culture podcast. And that's why Kimberly, who is the founder of Last Call, is here today. I'm really looking forward to... Oh, look at that. Instagram is working again. Thank God for that. That's been a couple of weeks, a little glitch, but it's back on now. So if you're listening or watching, you can watch on Instagram now. But welcome. Good morning, Kimberly.
Hi, good morning, Shawn. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you. So what I usually like to kick off is like, how did we get to the spot we're in right now with you personally in your career?
Thanks. That's a fully loaded question. It started a long time ago. What got me here is it's really the basis of my lived experience. So 25 plus years working front of house, started at a really young age, had a wild and incredible time and learned an immense amount about life and people and everything. But underneath that, in the shadows and in the corners, hides something that not a lot of people talked about, and I struggled immensely with. And that was mental health and substance use. So after about 25 years, finally hitting the wall, hitting the breaking point, and starting the journey on my own to heal and to look at all the stuff I had buried, and then recognizing the gap in the system of care within our industry and watching people very close to me slip through it. And so that was kind of the initial fuel on the fire, so to speak, that really started this journey and to get me to where I am today.
Do you think post-pandemic we're a little bit more open? Like I always mention, I do seminars and talk about the same sort of thing to a lot of companies. And do you think that we got better? Because I've always said I'd prefer to have an uncomfortable conversation with you when you're around than to get a 3 a.m. phone call that you're not. Do you think we're getting better post-pandemic?
I think we're becoming more aware post-pandemic. I think it's really shone a really bright light on what wasn't working and that gap in the system of care. And I think now we're starting to see the building blocks being put together to start to create that new foundation for where we're going in the future. So I guess to answer your question, yes, it's getting better because there's more awareness. And I think because people coming in is recognizing that need for change.
So I've been saying for a long time, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, we were this sort of turn and burn sort of mentality in the industry, very aggressively. Do you think that's still an issue that's putting pressure on these people that have these mental health and substance misuse problems?
I do believe so. I think that mentality is really what's keeping us stuck in that old cycle and in that old loop. And so I think we're starting to recognize the impact that turn and burn has, not only on the mental health of the employees, but let's also look at the leaders and the owners and operators in this space too. And it's finally something that people are starting to take notice to, again, not only because of the mental health struggles and the impact on the staff and the leaders, but also the bottom line of the business. It's not something that's on a P&L. We haven't been looking at the cost of what turnover really does and impacts the business side of things too.
So how do you approach that when it comes to a business leader reaching out to you and going, hey, I think I've got these issues? 9 times out of 10, every venue has these issues in some way, shape, or form in this day and age. But like, how do you tackle it when a operator comes to you?
So first and foremost, just finding out, like, a lot of questions being asked about finding out exactly what's going on and where the biggest impact is, and then working together on a strategy. to, first and foremost, you want to come together as a team and ensure that your values are aligned and your missions are aligned, and gain as much feedback as possible from not only the staff, but from the leaders, your management, your supervisors, from all corners of the organization, not only to, address buy-in, but also to gauge what they need and then align it with the business values and mission. And from there, it's education and training. So ensuring these leaders are equipped with the tools and resources that they need to better support their teams. And again, not only just for employees, but ensuring that owners and operators and leaders have the tools and resources they need to first and foremost, take care of their own well-being, and then it infiltrates into the full organization. Training people on the coach approach rather than the management approach. So really giving them the tools and skills and language they need to be able to address these sensitive topics in a manner that doesn't leave people in more of a vulnerable state. Implementing daily practices into an organization, it has to be consistent. It has to be on a daily basis, or you'll never really see that culture shift. So when working with organizations, it's really about how to work together to implement daily practices and consistency in that culture to really see a shift. And then, of course, you also want to track data, right? So you want to get in and you want to start actually looking at the numbers and finding out where the gaps are and where we can fill those with the resources and the tools. I think one of the biggest missed opportunities right now with organizations is the onboarding process. Huge opportunity to set the stage from day one, because that's when everybody's eyes are not only just on learning the menu and knowing the table numbers and the prep station, it's also them looking around, understanding what's comfortable, what's not, what's accepted, what's not, and so on and so forth.
Do you get, I'm going to be really blunt because I deal with way too many hospitality operators. Do you get sandbagged quite a lot where it comes down to ownership going, it's not my fault, it's the staff's fault? And we get the kids these days sort of mentality. Do you get brought in and then quickly realize that it's a very top-down mentality, not a bottom-up mentality that most operators feel like it is in their organization?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you're right. You can say most. It's not all operators, but most operators. And I think that's one of the challenging parts, is that it is from the top down, and we have to look at ourselves all individually and ask ourselves those deep, big questions about the importance of this. And how is our own mental health? How is our own self-care practice? How are we showing up as a leader? First and foremost. And I think that's where the biggest wall of resistance is, because if we want to see the culture shift and sustain itself, that's where it begins. And that's why first, the biggest part of what I do with organizations right off the hop is exactly that, is find out where the leadership team is at.
Mm-hmm. Have you had a couple of occurrences where you've had to pull an owner aside, like sit down and have a proper you're fucking up conversation where it's like, listen, like, I don't think your staff are great. Your management team seems to really love this place. The ownership of it's really great, but like, you personally need to fix a lot of your issues before we can really make this stick.
Yeah, some of those harder conversations have to be had, and that's the role of a really good coach, to be quite fair, is someone who can go in and reflect back what someone's not seeing and do it in a way that allows them to maybe see things in a different perspective. So yeah, calling people out on their shit is how it has to happen, right? Like, there's two layers of it. There's calling people out on their shit, but there's also a way of doing it through a lens of compassion and understanding, and ensuring they have the support and tools they need, and finding out where their blocks are and why they're not stepping up to look at their stuff, because maybe no one's called them out on it before.
Well, yeah, because I think hospitality has always been such a grind, and the burnout grind mentality of hospitality, because I think what you try and do is you're trying to put a structure that almost every other industry in the whole entire world uses. But for some reason, hospitality is like, no, we like to fly by the seat of our pants. We like to be fluid. We like to live in the gray area. I've used all those words in my life as it is. But like, hospitality has always been seen as this grind. Burnout mentality is like baked into the industry. how are you trying to break that cycle without killing the business? Because obviously we've got minimum wage, we've got work-life balance, we've got all these sort of things that sort of play into it. How do you sort of attack that?
So what you're saying is like without disrupting the daily operations of a business that are already very, very tight, and we're seeing a lot of demands for leaders, owners, ops. It's again, you're going to have to kind of like pull back the curtain and allow them to see what they're not seeing. Because this isn't something that has been calculated. It's easy to look at a spreadsheet and see what your food costs, your labor costs, and all those things are, but no one's actually looking at the data. So if you can sort of present that in a way that allows them to see the gain in starting to implement some of these and the return on that investment, it does start to open their eyes a little bit to addressing them. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
How long do you work with your clients when it comes to, because it is a little bit different. Again, we're talking about major industries where structure and systems are in play all the time. Hospitality still fly by your seat of pants. How long do you stay with a client to make sure that stuff gets implemented and you start collecting that data, like your turnover rate and all that sort of thing? How long do you stay with them to sort of nurture that process?
So for me, minimum of 6 months before you even start to really, so we can gain a lot of that data and really start to see a shift take place. And then it can extend. It depends how deep these organizations want to go, because, we can really start to get into, leadership coaching and do deeper dives. So it's really up to the organization how deep they want to go and how, long lifetime value that they want to see in the sustainability in their organization. Because once you start to see the impact, it just becomes part of the daily operations after 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. It just becomes kind of who you are.
How do you break down the walls and get people to trust? And because I think this is anyone as a new manager or a new operator going into an existing business, how do you break down the walls to get staff to trust you and start to open up and talk to you about the problems? Because a lot of times owners are going a million miles an hour. They're putting out fires. They have no idea what is going through the head of the busser or the head server. How do you break down the walls and build that trust and that sort of transparency within the organization?
I think it comes to the basis of what this is built on, and that's number one, my lived experience. So I've walked in the shoes of many of them. And so creating that space, psychological safety 100% is really the basis of creating that space for people to want to open up and share and say, hey, listen, like I am struggling, I need help with this. Just giving them the space to share and listening. And finding out exactly what they need, because not everybody needs the same thing. And so when they understand that there's multiple pathways, whether someone's struggling with mental health or substance use, social media, like there's always different things that people are struggling with. So it's not kind of one size fits all. So when they realize that they have multiple pathways to start to look, then they feel more comfortable starting to take small steps.
Do you tend to do that individually, or do you tend to do it like in a group mentality?
So mainly at this stage, I've done a lot of just one-on-ones with individuals. And as I'm growing, group coaching is definitely something that'll be part of the programs, because there's a lot of power in sitting in a room with other people who may be going through something that you're not, and maybe you're not comfortable sharing, but hearing someone else share in itself is very healing and reassuring for someone. So there's a lot of power in the group settings.
So I think there's a massive misunderstanding about today's generation, and as an older person in the industry, and you've got the same sort of life experience, like it is sometimes very easy to go kids these days. I try and preach that why should we give the industry that's already sort of broken to another generation and expect them to do the exact same thing that we did? There's a certain level of sacrifice that I kind of miss in today's generation of like sacrificing to get ahead, so that they're a little bit more appreciative of that sort of thing. But also, I never want anyone to be expected to work 18-hour shifts, 16 hours, 6 days a week, especially at like 21, 22 years old. How are you seeing this next generation and how they're playing into the hospitality industry from an operational point of view?
I really love this question because it's really fascinating. The industry, actually, we've got like 3 generations right now. If you look inside working within this industry, so we're at a kind of crossroads because this new generation is a lot different than previous. And I don't, if we don't shift for them, we won't be sustainable. I think it's time that we actually recognize the needs of this new generation coming through. And I'll give you an example. I recently worked with a bartender, came in, no experience at all, 19 years old, social anxiety, but willing and able to be coached and to learn regardless of that fear and uncomfortable feeling that he had. And he, in 6 to 8 weeks, he was thriving. Like, he wasn't looking at recipes anymore. He was like starting to like speak to guests where he was in his shell to start. And so I'm sharing that because I think we have a great opportunity to start to take our time to actually train these individuals with the tools and resources rather than just throwing them into the deep end. I remember starting in many different places where it was like, here's the menu, there's your station, here's the table numbers, have at her, right? And that kind of sink or swim. So I think from an operational perspective, I think it's about taking the time and really, again, finding out what they need, because they are our future generation and they're the ones if we nurture and support in a way that sets them they need, then we're going to see a big shift in the coming years, because they are the new ones stepping in. And yeah, I see a lot of posts about this, them being soft or not wanting to work, they're lazy. And I completely disagree with that. It's that they're not going to put up with what we put up with. So we're viewing it through that lens. Yet if we view it through the lens of what they've just experienced, especially through COVID, this young fella that I just trained, 5 years of his life, where a lot of them are in the state of wanting to connect with others, to learn social skills, was taken away from them. And so that's what we have to kind of step into their shoes a little bit and realize that if we want to sustain this industry, we need to nurture that part of them.
That's a good point about COVID, because I don't think we've seen the full play out of social anxieties and stuff with the next generation as I think we're seeing now, because of that deep connection and mainly being online and sort of, it's a whole different animal that we didn't have to deal with as our generation.
Yes, it certainly is. And what great timing and what a beautiful opportunity this is giving us to reset. I think I heard a statistic that 6 million people left the industry over COVID. And to me, again, what a great opportunity. We can sit and cry about it and say we're all short-staffed and this isn't, or we can really reframe it and say, let's start fresh here and use this as an opportunity to start to nurture and train our staff, give them the resources they need, let them know that they're supported and that this industry is tough. As Chow says, it's tough. So let's talk about it.
So from your point of view, because I think any operator that's sort of listening to right now, a lot of them would do here's your menu, here's your training, I'll walk you around and there's your shift, away you go. How many days of training do you see as like a general rule of thumb for, let's say, a bartender in a restaurant, brand new? How long do you think a good amount of training days is good for the industry now?
There's a lot of variables in that, I think, because it depends on the person, it depends on the place, what service and what's being expected of the individual, to suit the business needs.
You just mentioned the very first thing is like depending on the person. And that's an important part because everybody learns slightly different. Everybody adapts slightly differently. And we're not taking that into account when it comes to these onboarding mentalities. So just keep going with how many days do you think is a nice, like, rough sort of day rate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's always that 90-day mark that always seems to be the norm of the 3 months you get your probation, right? And things like that. But I would say the first 30 to 60 days are the most important. And it depends on the role. Like, it's hard to distinguish exactly what the training, exactly the number of days. I actually can't really give that a concrete number. Yeah, so maybe expand further on the question or a little bit more details, and maybe I can jump in there.
Well, I'm just trying to get a feel, because I sort of have in my head how many days a staff member needs to take to get ready to start taking sections for themselves and working the bar by themselves. Obviously the 30 to 60 day mark is always a really great marker, and I have usually set aside like 4 to 5 meetings in that time frame with the person to check how they're doing, their progress, what they need help with, so on and so forth. But I think a lot of the times it is one size fit all for a lot of operators to just go, everybody is going to do it this way, and then they'll be ready to serve a section. So I'm trying to get your advice on that, because I think a lot of operators still are thinking that one size fits all mentality.
Got it. Yeah, and I think that that's almost an easy way out, right? So it's like treating everyone the same is just, it's kind of an easier way to do it. And I understand that, because, you know, owners, operators, leaders have a lot on their plate to manage. But if we really want to see a decrease in staff turnover, this is where we would designate someone as a trainer to ensure, just like you said, that proper check-ins are being done throughout the process to be gauging exactly where and then maybe giving progress reports back on their progress. And so I think it's a really great opportunity to even allow like other people to be a part of it as well. I'm kind of picturing something, but I don't really know where I'm going with it to articulate it.
Well, I think what you said in the very beginning is like what sort of person they are. I've had in my past, I had 2 bartenders. One is he can read a recipe, and that recipe's in his brain for the rest of his life. And the other is more of a tactile bartender. And I've shown the video a million times on my social media, but he got flashcards and sat in his backyard to learn a cocktail menu with his girlfriend spraying in the face with a hose if he got the cocktail recipe wrong. And that is how he learned the cocktail recipe. And the week after he did that, he came back in and he was fast, he was clean, he was concise, and knew the cocktail recipes. So when I saw that, from then on, I knew how I had to teach him on anything. Gin, whiskeys, anything. Everything had to be more of a tactile way of doing things for him. My other bartender, I could give a piece of paper to, and he'd be like, "Yep, no problems at all. I know everything I can possibly know about gin now."
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I've kind of experienced this. I've taught some programs in the past with an organization. We supported people in recovery through this kind of self-development program. And what I had to do is adapt the learning to suit each individual, because some people learn by doing, some people learn by reading. And so you're exactly tapping into that. So it's really about each individual unique needs of the person. And that just really shows like great interest in the person. If the organization is taking the time to get to know each individual coming on board, they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel acknowledged. And that's how we retain staff.
And I think, again, it's that old age adage of like, well, this is not the way we used to do it. We used to do it this way. I'm like, but you could be losing some really valuable people in your organization that would be with you for many, many years, because you're not trying to adapt to how they do it. And you could be missing out on some really valuable people in your organization.
100%. Just like the person I was sharing, the new bartender. If we had approached that through the lens of which we did, we could say pre-pandemic or years ago, he wouldn't have stayed. There is absolutely no way. Now I'm getting, he's getting compliments on his old fashions and the cocktails, like it's really amazing to see him come out of his shell. And that's going to go with him. He's 19. That's going to go with him now forever. He's learning these social skills that are setting our future generations up.
So we've talked about a lot of the entry-level staff, the staff that are running our organizations. What do you see are the big threats for operators, or the biggest issues that operators are facing in this day and age with mental health and substance misuse? Because I think operators, and to a second degree managers, believe they need to be infallible for their organization. They need to be completely above their staff in a way of like, I've got to be the leader in that point of view. I can't have bad days. I'm going to only can have good days. Those sort of things. What do you think are the biggest concerns for operators with the mental health in this day and age?
I think it really comes down resources and tools. There's just not enough. there's enough out there. They're just not being readily available and being made ready. I think that is one of the biggest things that can support individuals, is asking for help, and knowing which direction to take. I think a lot of resistance comes from fear of change. And, there's a really deep level of vulnerability that comes with this work. And I think that's a really important thing to shine a light on, that it's safe to be vulnerable and start having the conversations and not hiding if you're not well, like really, right? Like, so it's, if you're a leader and you are struggling, like, it shows the way that you show up and the way that you lead the team. And so if you can speak to that and show that you're getting the help or getting the resources and the tools implemented, it just infiltrates through the organization. So I think that was kind of a roundabout way of getting there, but I think I answered your question.
No, it's perfect, because I think the hardest thing, especially in males in their 40s in the hospitality industry right now, is that vulnerability. And I'm very open with my mental health, and I talk about it regularly, and I'm very open about it because I want more people to be vulnerable about it, because the industry is very fucking hard.
It sure is. It sure is. And so when we start to hear our leaders speak about it, when we start to kind of normalize the conversation and admit, like, everybody has hit the breaking point in this industry. Nobody here is made of concrete. Like, we all have the feelings. It's just how well do we speak to them, and what are we using to cope with them? And if our leaders are coping with them in unhealthy ways, even if it's not in front of the staff, it's felt. It's felt in how we show up and how we lead and how we run our teams. And so that loops back around to the beginning of this conversation. It really starts with each individual person to want to make the change first and foremost for themselves. And then by extension, it supports the industry.
So if you had a crystal ball, what would be the one outdated hospitality practice that you'd want to wipe off the face of the earth right now?
Ooh, staff drinks. People are not going to like it that I say this, and I understand, and I completely do. But what I've witnessed in my day, it's not worth it if one person on that team is struggling, and that's fuel on their fire. If you want to have drinks after work, or like, I think incentivizing a great job with alcohol at the expense of someone who's struggling is not worth it. There are bars and restaurants in the vicinity of where we all have worked, right? Find a local pub. It's not about sucking the fun out or the vibe out, but it's about keeping our people safe and supported. And I've seen it too many times. Somebody's trying to maintain their recovery and there's staff shots going around and staff drinks, and I've seen them slip through the cracks. And it's one simple thing. There are many other ways that we can use that as an opportunity to incentivize our staff rather than giving them alcohol.
I'm going to get a lot of bad comments about that one, but
I know you are. And you know what? I 100%, I know I am. And it's funny because I didn't hesitate to say it. And I used to be one who would probably resist that too. Like, if you said that to me 10 years ago, right, I definitely would have had some backlash. So anyone who's listening who, I made you squirm in your seat a little. I completely understand. But when you start to look at the statistics of the people who are struggling and who are slipping through the cracks, to me, it's a no-brainer. And really, if we want to maintain staff, and again, we just spoke about the new generation, they're not big drinkers. Yeah. They want different incentives. They want to be seen and heard in ways that support their well-being.
Talking about incentives, like money-wise and stuff, do you find that most operators, when they come to you, they see change in these tweaks that we've been talking about to cost money? Or do you see you figuring out a way to sort of pitch someone's like, no, listen, if we fix these things, you're going to make money. Yes, it'll cost you money to start, but you'll make money in the long run. How do you sort of convince them of that?
Yeah. Well, first, I don't really want to convince anyone, but yes. How do I allow them to see, and how do I really do it? And It's really when you start to break the numbers down and starting to really like look at case studies and what's worked in the past and what successful companies are doing to retain their staff and how it trickles through the entire organization right down to the guest experience. And so, yeah, laying out the numbers. And, this has actually been one of the hardest things for myself since starting this is having to sell turnover, having to actually market it as a business. Like, hey, you're going to save money and likely make money if you start to take care of your staff and start to implement, mental health support and substance use recovery resources and stress and burnout prevention and those kind of things. Not only does it keep our people well, but it saves and makes you money too. So
it is crazy with all AI and everything in the world now. You could literally go to ChatGPT and go, "Hey, ChatGPT, how much does it cost me to keep a staff member for a extra year?" And it'll be like, "Hey, it's going to cost you $1,500 in training, incentives, like any sort of like those sort of things." And it's like, "Okay, ChatGPT, how much does it cost me to replace a staff member?" Well, it's going to cost you $3,500 to $5,000 to replace, retrain, and that sort of thing. And people go, "That doesn't make sense." I'm like, yes, keeping people costs you less than replacing people.
Again, like it's something that we haven't been looking at, right? It was just part of the industry. And so it's time to change that narrative and really start to break it down for people. And I mean, a manager replacement is upwards to 14,000. And, I see a lot of management turnover because they're not having the tools and resources they need to support the staff. So it's an expensive business not to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that we're in a position now that we can still tweak and fix things and evolve into a better industry? And what does that look like for you over the next 10 years?
I believe that yes, there is huge opportunity, and I see the light. I can see the shift, taking place again, especially with this new generation coming through. We have a long road ahead of us. But in the next 10 years, I really see these support systems embedded in organizations, whether that's a recovery coach embedded in an HR team, a recovery advocate embedded into the team. So starting to build support systems within the team to alleviate that pressure on management and on the owners and ops, right? So it just kind of starts to build momentum and work as a unit. So that's really where I see it, where it just becomes the norm to have these conversations, where it's part of onboarding, where you have the team come together and you make sure they have the tools that they need, the language that is required to be able to speak to these topics. So there's a lot of opportunity and possibilities here for us to really shift this industry to something that we can be proud of to hand over to our next generation.
You were mentioning something about a recovery agent within the organization or within your team, or like actual operational team. And I find it's the hardest thing sometimes. And I've had it a couple of times where people have been like, "I don't really want to be in the industry anymore. I'm really interested in gardening," or I don't like working the late nights. I want to use my degree in architecture. And I was part of a group in Vancouver, and I was like, "Well, wait a second. Like you want to leave us. I don't want to lose you because you're fantastic, and I can keep you a couple of nights a week on the floor. But we are opening up more venues. Would you want to be part of our design team? And we're going to open 3 or 4 venues. So like my gardener, bartender, I was like, well, I know you've got a relationship now. Let's get a community garden for you to look after all the herbs for all the venues, and you can come in and bartend like the couple of days a week that you want to work. I don't want to lose you. You're a great staff member." And I find a lot of organizations don't ask this team like, "Oh, do you want to be a manager?" They just say, "You're going to be the new manager." They don't like, it's not a two-way street conversation. But I think that there's an opportunity for someone who may have gone through a substance misuse issue and recovered from that and is like that beacon of help, that you can still fold into your staff, and they can still serve 4 days a week, and then 1 day a week they're doing admin around that title.
So good. So good. I love this because you're tapping into individual skills and attributes and what people excel at, and then using it to grow the business and to continue to work together. And it really also shines a light on how many transferable skills we have in this industry. And if the job role that we're currently in is not making us happy, there are many pathways in which we can take that still keep us in the industry that we love. I got really into the seafood distribution side. When I had to step off the floor, I started hauling seafood, live lobster, crab. It was an incredible job, but it still kept me close. I managed about 50 to 75 accounts. So I was still working closely with chefs, but it switched my schedule and it got me away from the bar, but still in the industry that I love so much. So I really love that point. And yeah, I think there was a question there, but I got a little bit carried away. I got all excited about my fishmonger days.
I think this is that a lot of people think that they either can be in the industry in an operational serving position or bartending position, or out of the industry. There's no middle ground that you can still enjoy all the things the industry can give you, being a beer rep or a wine rep or, like as you said, seafood monger. Like, why not be a seafood monger? But the one thing, actually, before we tie it off into my deep podcast questions, we have talked a lot about the front of house. And obviously you do work in the back of house. The back of house, I think, is probably one of the biggest hotspots in a restaurant in the way of like change, like how to actually make change in the back of house. Have you dealt with a lot of back of house that have given you inspiration for what's going to happen in the back of house in the next couple of years? Because the chef masculine toxicity, all the things that are bad juju, we see it we still see it romanced in media. Do you find that the back of house is changing as fast as the front of house?
Yes, I'm seeing a lot of communities pop up for the back of house support. I'm seeing a lot of movement towards supporting the back of house and a lot of openness and willing to start to look. I think after the recent losses of some very well-known chefs in the industry, it's starting to shine a light more. And the more chefs I talk to, whether they're leaders in this space already doing things, or their clients who have been pushed to the breaking point, there's a big change going on in the back of house. I definitely believe that. There's so many organizations and not-for-profits out there doing incredible things in the space. There's a big light shining, I think, in the chef in the back of house for sure.
Yeah, I think again that vulnerability is, I think chefs are even probably less vulnerable than ownership sometimes because of that. Like I got to be up at 5 a.m. I got to do X, Y, Z, and it's still romanced very much in the media, which I don't think helps as much as it probably should.
Yeah. And, when I sit down with these chefs who have been pushed to the breaking point, who have that kind of that armor on, when you start to actually probe and ask questions and find out deeper, they're some of the most vulnerable and, really, really sensitive men that are in there. But they're not given the space to show that. They're not given the psychological safety or we've never allowed that in the kitchens, right? And it's not about turning it into therapy sessions, but it's just about allowing them the space to crack open that light a little bit. And witnessing that has been truly remarkable.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've worked with a lot of chefs in those sort of non-profit organizations and stuff like that, and I completely agree. Like, I think it is just something that we need to pull back, and we don't need to be brave machismos anymore.
No.
So we're in August now. What's your plan for the next 4 months and the rest of the year?
Oh, good question. Yeah, it's really full on right now. I've got some super exciting things happening. I'm going to wrap up the rest of the month, just here on the Sunshine Coast. Really enjoying summer, and then into September I've got a few speaking engagements. So I'm going to be in Calgary. I'll be at the next expo, the Food and Beverage Expo, there on the 8th and 9th of September in Calgary. I'll be a guest speaker. Then I'm doing a workshop. So we've got Women of Recreation, Tourism and Hospitality. I'm going to be facilitating their workshop on September 18th. And then I'm off to just outside Seattle to a place called Spokane. And I'm going to be speaking at the Governor's Safety Council conference there around mental health. So September seems fully loaded. And then the rest of the year, it's just maintaining this momentum and continuing to have these kinds of conversations and continuing to kind of put the building blocks in and see how this wants to evolve. I've got a lot of people knocking on my door wanting to help and support. And we talked about, the Recovery Champion kind of advocate embedded in organizations. And one thing that I'm so grateful for is how many people want to get involved in this, and how many people are actually starting to recognize that not only their voice matters, but as an industry, as a collective, we're starting to come together. So I'm just going to keep building that, just keep getting louder and louder over the next, 6, 12, 18 months. Because, this is long-term for me. This is, it's my passion. It's my purpose. If I anchor into everything I've been through, this is definitely why I'm here.
Nice. So we're at the stage of the podcast where I do this every podcast. Last 5 questions of the podcast are all deep podcast questions. Usually throw people off quite a bit. But
cool.
What is the one lesson or experience that has shaped your perspective the most, and how do you carry that forward in your life?
Sobriety shifted my perspective in life entirely. That's a personal note, and that's I never saw the world so clear. I never had this much confidence of who I truly am authentically. I took the mask off, and my world revealed to me things that I never even knew possible.
Wow. If you could leave one lasting message or piece of wisdom for the world, what would it be and why?
Your voice matters, not just for yourself, but for those who are no longer here to have a voice and to share. You're never alone.
Looking back on your journey, what is something you wish you had understood earlier in life?
How to manage money. Man, I lived in a cash world, front of house for 25 years, I wish someone had taught me how to manage my money. I'm much better now, but I'll tell you, those cash days, a lot of it didn't go under my pillow. It went to other things, which I won't say.
How do you define success, and has your definition of it changed over time?
How do I define success, and how has it changed over time? Yep. So now I define success as honestly living a life that I no longer need to escape from. It's not about how much money I have in the bank. It's about waking up and choosing intentionally how I want to show up and how I want to live. And that's changed over the years because I never really asked myself what success was before. When I was working in the industry, I never knew anything outside of it. I never did anything else until the age of 38. So 15 to 38 besides serve a table. So I never really asked myself those deep questions before. So success has just really evolved over the last 5 years. I'm about to hit 5 years of sobriety on the September 1st. So thank you. Thanks for good questions.
What do you hope your legacy will be, and what steps are you taking to build it?
Woo. I think everyone knows the answer to this. Catalyst for change. I want to leave behind a legacy of just being a catalyst for change, first and foremost in my own life. My personal development comes before anything else. And then by extension, that becomes professional development and leaving this industry better than we found it.
Well, Kimberly, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. That was amazing. And I hope anyone listening now or listening when the podcast comes out actually takes a little bit from it, because it is one of my biggest pet peeves right now is that we're still treating this industry the same we were before the pandemic. And I preached it during the pandemic that it could be the great reset. And we still didn't see the great reset that I hoped for. We've seen good change, but I really was hoping for the great reset that the pandemic could have been. So I really appreciate all your time, and thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Shawn, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you. I'll see you very soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, post shifters, that's it for now. Keep your standards high, your spirits neat, and your team tighter than your forecast. Catch you next week on the Post Shift Podcast.